All right, everybody, welcome to another episode of Yes and Ask Me. This is a improv podcast put on by Bexar Stage out of San Antonio, and we host this show every single Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So we have one more show coming up this week. Today's topic is vulnerability. And so the first panelist and my co-host, Tina Jackson, would you turn on your video?
Happy to.
Welcome, Tina.
Hey, what's up, Clint?
Hey, could you tell the viewers at home how long you been doing improv?
Yeah, I've been doing improv for the last 20 years. I started in the year 2000. I have gone all over the world performing and teaching. I spent 10 years in Chicago training, and I opened Bexar Stage in San Antonio 3 years ago, where I am now the artistic director and owner.
Awesome, thank you. The second panelist is Gloria Rabil out of Austin. Gloria, would you turn on your video? Hey, Gloria.
Hey, Gloria.
Hello.
How are you?
20 years. I'm good. How are you? Tina, are you even old enough to have done improv for 20 years?
I know, I get that a lot, but I started young.
Yeah, you did.
So Gloria is our outside panelist today, outside of Bexar Stage. However, Gloria has played a lot at Bexar Stage and all around Austin, where you are based. Gloria, can you tell everyone and be included about your improv experience?
Sure. I've been doing improv probably about a little over 10 years, and I've been almost with the same troupe for almost that long. We started out as a dramatic troupe because two of us were afraid of the pressure of being funny. So
I love it.
We kind of evolved from that into kind of whatever, grounded improv. So.
Awesome, thank you. I look forward to asking you more about your history and especially with vulnerability. Final panelist, somebody that I grew up in improv with, me and Matt took classes together. Matt, would you unmute and turn your video on?
Yo.
Hello, Matt.
Hey, Matt.
So Matt, I'll give you a little bit of introduction, but fill in the rest. How long have you been doing improv?
Coming up on 2 years. I don't know if the last months count, but we're gonna.
We'll try. It started 2 years ago.
Yeah. So like linear time, yes. Although I haven't been getting the reps in like normal, obviously.
Yep.
Like crazy, getting the reps in like crazy. You play on all our teams.
Yeah.
Totally.
Okay, so our topic today is vulnerability. A lot of times in real life, that means bearing your soul, being very open and honest with people. On the stage, Tina, does it take are there multiple ways to be vulnerable, or is it primarily crying real tears?
Great. Excellent question, honestly. Yeah, being vulnerable on stage doesn't necessarily bringing your real shit, your real personality, your real moments on stage, but it is the acknowledgement that every single character that you portray is somehow a version of yourself, right? That it's coming through the lens of you. So you're adding yourself to the character of this person that you're playing, or this animal that you're playing, or this ridiculous moon alien that you're playing. Like whatever you're doing it through the lens of yourself. So allowing yourself to be part of that character, I think, is what makes your character truthful, honest, reactive, and puts them in a position where they can react to things in a way that the audience will really respond to because it's familiar. So I think vulnerability is really important as far as a connection tool to the audience and to your scene partners.
I really love that thought of you don't have to play yourself every single time to be vulnerable, because that gets boring.
Can you? Of
after
course
a
you
while.
can. You of course can, but you don't have to do everything from the true vulnerable broken heart of Tina Jackson. You don't have to bring every part of yourself every time, but using what you know to be true, what you know to be honest, what you know to be accurate in the world, and putting that through the lens of your character lends real authenticity to the show and makes it something that the audience can and really identify with.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Gloria, I am just now getting to know you. And I think it's going to be good for our viewers who are primarily San Antonio Bexar Stage people to also get to know you. You've been doing improv. I I take it because you said dramatic improv, it's long form improv. Have you been involved in any other types of performing arts?
Yes, I'm a writer, and I've written films and short films and produced them, and I also did some theater in college, and I've done a little bit of theater since I've started improv as well.
Okay, I would imagine, I love that you have, because that goes into the question I was hoping to ask you.
He was hoping you'd say yes.
I imagine vulnerability is important in those other arts. Is there a difference in vulnerability in long form improv than vulnerability in writing or screenplay or non-scripted or scripted theater?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that, because like when Tina was talking, it made me very much think about writing and how like my first novel I wrote, and my husband at the time read it at last of most anybody that I was close to. And when he came to me, he's like, oh, it's interesting that this is like you and this is like you, and it's things I didn't see. And I realized that's when I really woke up to the fact that every single character in that book has a part of me in them. And I think you do have to, especially the first draft, you have to kind of pour yourself into it and then pull yourself back.
I think that's why people care about those characters, is because they're human. You know, they've got that human core that comes from a real place.
So improv feels a lot like writing. It really does, or vice versa. And when I started improv, it opened the door for me to write. I guess in my mind, I considered myself wanting to be a filmmaker, but never really knew who was going to create these stories that I had already created in my head. And then I realized, oh, I'm a writer. So, that was.
Well, and that I would say almost, just knowing you as long as I have, is like almost your primary thing now, right? Would you say you're primarily a writer? I mean, I love your improv.
Yeah, I would say, well, yes, because I'm trying to make a living writing. And I think we all know it's not easy to do if you're just performing, especially. So yeah, I try to do, one of the things I'm really passionate about is helping people tell their stories. I really like coaching people, reading their stuff, telling them what I think. I love giving my opinion just in general. So, doing it and helping people, because I think everyone has a book in them, honestly.
I really do too.
Nurture. Yeah.
I love that parallel of the characters that you write are all a piece of you. And that parallels what Tina was saying, is that every character you play, if you're playing vulnerably, is also a piece of you.
Well, even if you're not playing vulnerably.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I say all the time, all your characters are you. They're all just different like versions of you. Even if you're trying to wall yourself off and be an impenetrable wall of nobody knows me, all of your characters are you.
It's whether you realize it or not. That's where it's like, are you being vulnerable intentionally, or are you trying to, have you ever tried so hard not to do something that you end up coming around the back and doing it anyway? And that's how I feel like people who are trying not to like let themselves out do in another way.
That brings us to good old Matt.
Matt, you raised your finger in the middle of that. Were you going to add something?
Oh no, I think that's probably the best way to identify. I think a lot of what I do is it's unintentional vulnerability, in which something's happening in a scene and you just react. And especially with me, where I kind of wear all my emotions on my face, and as things are happening, it's pretty clear how I feel or think about it. That vulnerability just happens regardless of whether I choose to have it happen or not.
Yeah, your face will betray you every time. If you are not going to cop to an emotion, your face will show the audience how you actually feel.
Okay, so I want to dig into this idea about intentionally vulnerable and unintentionally vulnerable. And so I'm gathering, Tina and Gloria, y'all are capable of being intentionally vulnerable on stage, and Matt defaults to unintentional vulnerability. So yeah, how do you become? I mean, what's the difference there? First of all,
a particular person.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think we've talked a lot on this show about head, heart, and X Factor kind of players. And I would say Gloria and I are both really heart players. So I think heart players in general tend to be a lot more emotional in their improv and how they interact with the world, right? That's like, I see what you're saying. Oh, and I feel something for you. And it's like, it's a little bit more instinctive in that way. I think people who are not heart players have to work a little harder at vulnerability, honestly.
Well, that sounds actually opposite of like Matt, a head player should have to intentionally do it, whereas you unintentionally do it because it's an instinctive reaction.
Yes.
It may be intentional and unintentional isn't the right word. Maybe it's aware and unaware. Maybe that's better because
okay, I like that.
Yeah,
because you're right. I would say that for me, it's 100% just spills out of me. If I find myself being afraid, and you ask like, how do you get to where you do it instinctively? Is, it's like, I think it was Del Close that said, what is it? Go through fear. What's on the other side of fear? I don't remember what the quote is.
No, I'm going to let you butcher it. I love it.
Please do. Please, go through fear to get to what you want is the gist of it.
Yeah.
And I think when you find yourself being afraid, if you just push on through it, then that can become a habit and a muscle. But yeah, I think it's absolutely unintentional. I wish sometimes in my life I could not cry when I felt sad or not, show my cards so easily.
I think a lot of it, I think, heart players, I would say in general, like tend to really sink into their scenes and really inhabit their characters instead of playing them. I really feel like, I think Gloria, you and I did a scene once where we were a lesbian couple on the verge of divorce. Do you remember? And I am not a lesbian. I was a married woman. Gloria was a married woman, both to men. Lesbianism is not necessarily our purpose, our personal truth, but we've both have been in relationships that have struggled. And I think in channeling that character, all I was doing was channeling a personal struggle to be married to Gloria, or to be married to my husband, or to be married to, like just a relationship that struggles. I was channeling some truth, but I was playing a character that was different from myself. And that came very naturally when I realized that whatever the initiation was, or wherever we started, I felt annoyed. And when you feel something on stage, attributing it to a person, I feel annoyed because of you. Feeling an emotion at a person connects you to them, and then you can tap into some real feelings. Why would I feel this way toward this person? And then having things develop from there in the yes and, dialogue process. But channeling some real things, even though my relationship with Gloria in that particular scene was not in any way the same as the relationship that I had with my partner, was channeling some actual vulnerabilities to get to a character that was relatable and honest without being that character in particular. Does that make sense? Did I ramble?
Makes sense. And I think to add to that, I feel like I cheat a little in how I can be vulnerable more easily, because I'm playing with two people who have become my best friends, and who I know that no matter what I dish out, whatever they hand to me, none of us have bad intentions, and they'll take it and hold it as gently, and so will I. So we're really able to expose ourselves in a way that's super safe, which I think personally, I think that might have been the first time you and I had ever played together, Tina.
For
I
sure,
still felt safe around you, just as safe as I do with Paul and Ryan. And I think you definitely can play with people that you don't know and still feel safe, but it definitely makes it a lot easier if you're with people that are like your family.
I really, really like that.
I really like that too.
A way to get vulnerable is to feel comfortable.
Yeah, and trust is such a part of that. Would you agree with that, Matt? Do you feel like you have an easier time being vulnerable or expressing an emotion with somebody you're comfortable with?
Yeah, absolutely. Because, I've played in some of the jams and other things where you just kind of have a variety of people, and the group dynamics and who you're with absolutely, for me, make a difference on what I feel I can do or not do, or show or not show. Just because I don't know where other people are.
Mm-hmm.
And so
totally.
it's just a thing of not even where other people are necessarily, is where I am, because as me personally, I take some time for me to get to know people and for me to really speak up or do anything, because I just tend to like to sit in the back and, play background.
Mm-hmm.
And so if we got a whole bunch of new faces and new people around me, for me, I'm just going to kind of fade into the back and observe and see what's going on before I really feel comfortable, coming forward and maybe making one of those initiations,
Matt, I want to jump in and dig a little bit deeper on your style of vulnerability, which I don't think we've really named properly yet, because we've said the hearts play their vulnerability unaware of it because it's a reaction, or maybe that is aware.
Or no, I think there's an awareness. It's just we're comfortable with it,
Intentionally,
it's not something. It's not something everybody's comfortable with. I think heart players are more comfortable with it because we're already coming from this instinctive kind of reactive place, and
Okay.
So, okay.
I've that helped me formulate it for Matt. So Matt, the vulnerability I've seen you play, and I've played with you on stage, comes from a lot of your background. You're playing pieces of your background. You had a very religious background, and so you're able to play. You played either God or Jesus in one scene, and it was really, really good because like you were coming with truth in there. You also we do Bachelors of Science together. And when we started off, you were channeling some talk show host. I forget the name, but like that was your character. And so there's all these pieces that are in Matt's mind that are informing your character.
Yeah, but it's coming from a mental place of like, I know a lot about this and therefore I feel comfortable about it, rather than I feel it and I feel comfortable about it. And so I think it's just channeling through there's just a different angle to it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Matt. I'm sorry.
Oh. And I think it's sometimes easier, or at least for me, to like put myself in the shoes of another character. And I would, you kind of know what they would be vulnerable about. So I'm able to play that easier, because sometimes it's hard for me to identify my own vulnerabilities. It's not something I necessarily want to look for all the time in myself, because that's hard and tough. And I avoid those things.
Acknowledged, yeah.
But it's so much easier to see vulnerabilities perhaps in a third party and be able to play those.
I feel like, you're just like satellite pinging vulnerabilities out of somewhere else, where, you can inhabit a character and figure out what they're vulnerable about, or how they would feel about something. So your emotions are coming from putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. And that still, I think, is a reflection of you. And I do think I've seen so many moments where you have been vulnerable. And I think one of the ways that you have been really vulnerable on stage, as I've seen you grow as an improviser, has been in sort of like a silly physicality sort of way. I'm remembering one scene in particular that you did with, I think it was during Brian's Gauntlet, where you were like sort of like, or maybe Tyler's Gauntlet. It was a Gauntlet.
He was a sea anemone for
the sea anemone, right? Yeah. Where he was just like down on the ground being a sea anemone, and he was like trying to trick somebody into saying something. And it was so funny. And I felt like that was really vulnerable because it was like such a physical character and so silly that sometimes I feel like silliness is a really vulnerability for somebody who like generally has their life pretty together and is like pretty buttoned up, which, if you first meet Matt, you might think that. But as you have become sillier, that's where I've found your vulnerability, is your willingness to just participate in something silly, even when there's no necessary like end goal or end point to it. You're just like, I'm gonna do this thing and we'll see. And I like that. That's a vulnerability too.
Yeah, definitely. Go ahead, Gloria.
Yeah, silly is definitely one of those things that I have a hard time with, because if you've ever had a picture of you taken on stage where you're in some not even intentional goofy position, but like you're in the middle of sitting down or something, you're like, Jesus, do I really look like that? Exactly, right? And so I find myself being very conscious of like where I am in the
how
space
I look and
how I look. So being silly is one of those places it's difficult for me to go physically because I'm worried about what it might look like. So
that sounds like a place for you, Gloria, to intentionally or be aware of being vulnerable. Do you ever push yourself to be silly? And if so, how?
I think like a lot of things in my life, I forget that I'm supposed to be conscious of it and end up being that way because I get wrapped up in the character. But yes, I do notice I had a hard time in my acting classes for the reason of being so conscious of the way that I looked, because I was in a class with 20 somethings that were all freaking gorgeous. And I'm like, what am I doing here? The scene I got for scene work was a mom. And I'm like, fuck, you know,
Yeah.
I mean, when I'm in improv, I can play a 12-year-old boy. Why am I playing a mom? Right. But this is like real acting. So, I try, that's one of the reasons I like improv, because I can get kind of swept away. And whenever it's going back to the Del Close thing that I've completely botched, but I think about that. I think where I'm not going to grow if I can't push myself a little bit to be different than, you know, than I'm comfortable being. And singing is another one of those. I think singing is very.
Oh my God. Yeah. When I have to sing on stage, that is my very most vulnerable, like the metaphorical, like kitten showing his tummy of like, kill me. Like everything is out there, and your reaction right now could either kill me or absolutely validate, like, you know, all of these fears of like not necessarily being good at it or rhyming. I hate. And I know you don't have to like rhyme when you sing, but like I always feel like I have to.
You feel like you do. And I think when I see people, especially people who can't sing, I am blown away.
I know, I value that vulnerability in others, but I have a very hard time bringing it out in myself. I see it and I'm like, man, that looks.
This is great. So this is something that level 1 students struggle with big time, is just basic vulnerability in showing who they are on stage. And still we have 10-year veterans, 20-year veterans who also struggle with a certain type of vulnerability. So what can improvisers do to break that? What will get you to rhyme? You know, what will get you to sing, Gloria?
I work on it. I work on it privately, honestly, especially since Lex and I started our Shakespeare duo, as I've been working on rhyming. A little less lately because of the pandemic, but in general, I literally will see something. I used to play a game with myself on the train in Chicago when I was working on rhyming specifically, but now I do it in the car when I'm driving, is look at a word on a billboard, any word, and then just try to think of anything at all that rhymes with it and just list them all out. Get in the habit of looking at a word and rhyming so that it becomes something that you're not as afraid of.
Because you're afraid of failing.
Of course I'm afraid of failing. And I love, you know, I love failure in general, like as a concept, but I never want to accomplish failure. Fuck, nobody does. So you practice the things that you're bad at or that you're not as confident at. That's a piece of advice that Susan Messing gave me, and probably has given thousands of others, is find the thing you suck at and suck more. Like, do it more. And the more you do it, the less you are afraid of it, because you've got some practice, you've got some reps, you have failed on your own enough that if you fail again in front of others, that it's not as.
How does that translate somehow? How does that translate to a student? Because rhyming is a very specific skill, but vulnerability on stage is not necessarily a hard skill. That's more of a soft skill where you're revealing an emotion.
Right. Oh, I hear what you're saying. It's not something you can practice as easily.
Right.
Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it kind of leaks into everything. And what I would say is, going back to fear is what stops us doing any of this, right? Whether it's conscious or unconscious. And the practice is just walking through it. And you know, you asked about like what gets me to sing. Well, I'll tell you, I tell my troupe members, if you endow me to sing, I'm fucking walking off stage. Like, don't do that. That's the only thing I won't do. I'll do anything else. But I signed up for a show one time that was like a free friend show, and it was, the last segment was mystery, right? And I'm like, I'm feeling brave. I just finished like this intensive. I'm like, sure, I'll do it. I know Jason Vines was doing it. I'm like, this is going to be great. And as we're lining up to go in the theater, I realize all 3 segments have already gone and there's a fucking piano in the theater. And I just look at Jason and I said, is this musical improv? And he goes, it is. I was like, oh. I mean, I just immediately started panicking. And so I stayed on the sidelines, but I came out when background people were, because I'm like, oh, this will be my part, so nobody will call on me. And at the end, Jason pulls me out on stage, puts me in the middle of the stage, and announces that Gloria doesn't like to do musical improv. Gloria doesn't like to sing on stage. It's a childhood trauma thing that happened. But and so I had to be a dog singing about why I didn't want to be in this dog show. I wept when I walked into the green room after. I was just like, I can't believe I did that. And that was a long time ago.
Was it super cathartic then to be able?
Well, it made me realize exactly why I was so scared of it. But the crowd was ridiculously supportive. Obviously, I managed to rhyme everything, which was freaking amazing.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And I mean, I almost cried through it. It was just so terrible.
But a dog singing about why he doesn't want to be there, and Gloria not wanting to be there, I think probably had a lot of really good truth to it, because what you're currently feeling is really mirroring what this character is feeling. And so I'm imagining that a lot of those similar emotions rose up even through the lens of this dog, right?
Yeah, and that was the gift Jason gave me. Like, here's I'm going to give you, sing about what's happening to you right now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But that's just such an example of how your character and yourself can really be mirrored together. And
yeah, talking about skills, hard skills, singing, rhyming, and soft skills, being emotionally vulnerable on stage, which is something that is a little bit more intangible, is a really good topic for Matt, who from level 1, when I was taking level 1 with you, the note from Brian, our teacher, was take it to an 11, meaning your emotion is at a 2, it's at a 3, crank that emotion up so the audience sees it. And all the way through level 6, with Tina teaching us, it was the same note about like, give us an emotion. Why do you feel that way? So Matt feels very comfortable with the intellectual side, and you're good at being smart. And so you can show that on stage. Have you tried to the other side of it? Have you tried being emotionally vulnerable on stage?
Yeah, there's been a couple of shows where, I really tried to bring that out. And I think a lot of it has been, like Gloria was saying, where, someone pushes you in that direction and forces you to do those things, has been, when I partnered with someone that is more, on the emotional, vulnerable side, and then I can see where they're going with things and, the reaction they're needing, for the scene. And so it puts me in a place where, okay, I got to dig down and figure out why my character wants certain things and doing things. And so I was forced to do it. And those have been good. Like, the end result was good. And I'm proud with how it played out. It's just tough to get up there.
Yeah, of course. And I think that's completely valid. I don't think it's easy to be vulnerable. We were talking a little bit before the show about a level 1 class that Clint was teaching that I was auditing, where one of the first days of the class, I don't remember if it was day 1 or 2, maybe 3, but one of our students said, God, Clint, it sounds like you're asking us to be really vulnerable. And the answer was, yeah, we are. I mean, that's a lot of what improv is. I wrote down in my notebook once, sorry, this is not supposed to be like an homage to Clint, but I wrote down in my notebook once something Clint said in that class, which was improv is a cocktail of vulnerabilities. And I love that phrasing. It's a cocktail of vulnerabilities. We're asking you to get up on stage, not have a script, not know what you're about to do, not necessarily know who you're playing across from, what the suggestion is going to be, how the show's going to go, whether the audience is going to like it. Like nothing is promised. And so already just being there is vulnerable. Like you're exhibiting a lot of vulnerability by standing up on stage and saying, I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm here. Stepping out on stage when somebody has an initiation saying, I don't know anything more than what you just said. And I'm with you, is vulnerable. I mean, and I think it's innately a vulnerable art.
Yes.
Actually art in general is pretty vulnerable, but
art you can't polish before you put out there. It's especially Yeah, and Clint, I actually think I have an answer to the question that you've asked a couple of times in a couple of different ways. Well, I mean, I don't know if it's an answer, but it's my answer to how to become more vulnerable, how to develop that soft skill. And I think that there are a number of things that you can do with, especially with the group that you're repeatedly playing with, but even to do this with a new group, if you have time to warm up, is you do exercises. Like a lot of the times Paul and Ryan and I will just sit around and talk about all the shit that's landed on us since the last time we were in the room together, right? And that opening up, we've come to trust each other, but that can happen pretty quickly if you do vulnerability exercises. And one of the things that Jeremy Sweetlam coached us for a while, and he had us do an exercise that was similar to something I had to write this week. I had to write my eulogy this week for a class.
Oh, yeah.
And he had us go to our funeral and talk to, I'm going to cry just thinking about it, talk to someone or the people at the funeral. And my kids were little at the time. And so I just wept and wept. I couldn't even speak. I was weeping so much. But that, being able to do it there, like word association or convergence or any of those things, being able to do it there exercises the muscle and makes it like more instinctual. You know, like if you're lifting weights at the gym and then you have to move your couch, right? You're not thinking about it. You just pick the couch up because you've built that strength.
Yeah, that's a really good point, honestly.
Yeah,
I love that.
Like acclimation to the scenario. I was thinking about this, like there's something to just acclimating to the stage itself.
Mm-hmm.
Like I remember, it's kind of like I was doing some work at a theater, like switching out lights, and so I was up on like 4 things of scaffolding. And when I first went up there to start switching out the lights, every move was super careful and I was paranoid. But after I was up there for a couple of hours, even though I'm still the same height off the ground, I felt much more comfortable moving around and shifting stuff and doing all that. So kind of a scaffolding stage scenario, I think, is kind of similar. The stakes are higher, but once you get used to them, it's not as big of a deal.
Yeah. And I think that's when you really start opening up. I don't expect level 1 improvisers to really come in off the bat and just be super, I expect some vulnerability in the way that it's like you attempt the exercise, you try, you might fail at it, and that's a risk, but I don't expect like the big, deep emotional scenes where you're giving a lot of history, and I don't expect all of that in level 1. But it's while you get acclimated, as part of the growth process, is like as you get comfortable either with these people or with this art form, as certain things become second nature, you can start opening up a little bit more. And that's what I generally see with our students as they grow through the program or grow in the community is, it's one of the reasons we say, that the 3 places you learn are in the classroom, in the audience, and on stage. I think there are 3 places you can find some of that trust is in the classroom, sitting there watching shows together and seeing vulnerability pay off, right? Like, see, oh man, that was such a risky move and it worked. It's worth trying something like that in a scene. If I want the reaction they got, I have to take the kind of risk that they took or whatever. And then obviously on stage yourself, where you try that and fail or succeed or pivot or tweak or push yourself to make some of those moves. But off stage, I think you can rep some of that stuff. And I think that's a really good way, opening up with a person, whether that's a significant other, whether that's a friend, practicing vulnerability of self can really help open you up on stage as well. Because it's something, now that I've said it, it's off my chest. Now I can say it in a different voice and it'll be a character move. But if there's something living in your head, it's almost guaranteed that you'll see it on stage at some point.
Who among us have been in therapy? You don't have to raise your hand or acknowledge it at all if you don't want to. But I feel like I feel like anything is like therapy in this respect, but especially improv, in that you can't do, see, or learn something until you're ready. I have discovered things about myself in the recent past in therapy that I'm like, how am I this age and I just am seeing
figured it
this
out.
thing that has been a pattern since I have memories. But there's no way I could have seen it until I cleared all that other stuff out. And I think that's a lot of how improv is. It's like, when you're up on that scaffolding, you're clearing the fears out. You've gone through all the scenarios of how you can fall and all the things that could happen to you. And now they're cleared out and you're starting to feel a little safer and more clear-headed. It's just in so many ways that you're just, if you're not ready, you're not ready.
That's great.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
We are out of time.
I know. That's crazy.
That was such a beautiful ending to it. To wrap it
perfect.
up about you'll learn, like, Gloria, thank you for one answering my question that I asked multiple times throughout about how can we become more vulnerable, and that is, one, trust with your teammate, and two, getting practice outside, and then three now is it'll open up to you as you progress through life, as you progress through improv, it'll open up to you. Really, really good. Matt, thank you for being vulnerable with us on stage.
Yeah. I was going to say, even this is an exercise of
Yeah.
vulnerability. Matt talking about vulnerability is vulnerable. So
we wanted Matt on here because
I love Matt.
I think if I were to rank like all the improvisers I know, Matt would be in the 40s of like most vulnerable. And I know like 50 improvisers.
Oh, I was like, what?
I was confused for a second.
I thought you were like,
I feel like
Matt is my 40th favorite improviser.
Out of 50, yeah. And Tina, thank you again for co-hosting with us.
Love it. Vulnerability is my favorite.
Yeah, we got another episode on Friday. That is going to be about physicality. We got another all-star cast talking about that. And to close out, it's tough times. Theaters are not doing great right now. So they need your help. They needed your help when you were an audience member and you could be there live and support the business, but that's not a possibility anymore. But what is a possibility is to donate. Small amount, big amount, whatever. Any sort of donation helps. Look at your local theater. If you're in San Antonio, help out the local theaters here. We're Bexar Stage. And then Austin, there's a bunch of theaters up there that Gloria plays at. Hideout, Cold Town, one more. Fallout, yeah.
And Merlin Works.
Comedy Sport. Yeah, they've got a bunch. So find your local improv theater, donate if you can. If you don't have a local improv theater or you especially like what we're doing, check out bearstage.com. We've got a link on our homepage, so you can donate. But support live art if you can, because it'll be a little while before your artists can get back up on their feet.
And wear a mask so that we can get up on our feet sooner.
So thank you guys. It's been really fun today.